What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Collider Interview Studio at TIFF 2024 at the Cinema Center, brought to you by Range Rover Sport. I am so lucky to get to chat with some of the team behind The Return. Huge congratulations on your film. Mighty ambitious production in many respects.
Yes, very ambitious. The idea of tackling Homer is silly. I mean, I think it was a risky thing to start with, but fortunately he speaks so much to humanity at any point in its history, and today in particular, that one had to put away the fear of the journey and just jump into it, and we did it.
Having done it and done it well, for any other filmmaker who might be inspired by you and want to adapt the material themselves, what is one do and one do not you would give someone for adapting Homer?
Read it. Really read it. Really dig into it. That's what you should do. What you shouldn't do, I don't think there are rules about not doing things. I think filmmaking has to be completely without rules, and everybody has her own take, their own take, and but the material Homer is so rich and so insightful and so powerful that it could feed hundreds of films. And what is in fact extraordinary is that it hasn't, and in particular with the Odyssey, no one has done a film of the Odyssey as written by Homer for 70 years. Kirk Douglas was the last Ulysses or Odysseus of the big screen.
I heard you mention that last night in the intro, I believe, and it shocked me.
It is extraordinary. I think maybe what we were talking about before, which is it's a scary challenge to even think about approaching Homer. You're going to lose by comparison, by definition. And so what you have to do is make sure that you actually have something to say, or at least that it has the material, the poem has spoken to you in a way that something interesting, you have a take, you have a point of view, you have a way of reading it, which is your own. Our own in this case, and otherwise it's not worth it.
I've kind of jumped ahead here. Clearly I know what The Return is, but our viewers might not know just yet because it is a film festival premiere. So can you give a brief synopsis of how you tackle the story?
The Odyssey is the second great epic poem that Homer wrote. It deals mainly with the return home from the war in Troy of Odysseus. We focused on one particular area of the poem, which is the actual physical return home. We don't deal with the journeys, which are in part magical, as recounted by Odysseus himself in part of the poem. We don't specifically deal with the Telemachus searching for news of his father on the mainland of Greece, which opens the poem. We specifically deal with the reuniting of a family, the reconnecting between Odysseus, his wife Penelope, the queen of Ithaca, and the son Telemachus. Of the two, Telemachus, who has never met really his father because the father left to go to war when Telemachus was an infant. So that's what we focus on. And if I may continue, what we are particularly interested in is reflecting on the nature of war and what it does to people. So our Odysseus is a man traumatized by what he has done and seen in the war, and a man who carries the guilt of violence and the guilt of not returning sooner home, which he theoretically could have done. And at the same time, we witness the relationship between the mother and the son, and the difficulty of that relationship as it's under the cloud of the absence of the king, of the rule maker in their island, and psychologically enormously difficult for a young man to grow up without a father figure, without the identity, or worse still, with the identity of a father figure who is famous to be a hero, but completely not present in his own life. That's really what we focus on. We focus on individuals, we focus on the effect of war on individuals, and that is what makes it completely contemporary or atemporal. It's universal and is timeless.
Charlie, there's a significant amount on your shoulders with this production between the source material, working opposite legends, the scale of the production. And I'm curious, when you first started working on it, do you remember a specific point where you kind of felt grounded and like you had confidence in yourself to thrive in this high pressure type of environment?
Yes. Yes. I was quite honestly really struggling with that, I think, in the beginning. And Uberto, being the compassionate and kind director that he is, was giving me a tremendous amount of space and confidence and trying to inject that in me. But it was something that I really needed to feel in myself, in my body. I needed to connect into it. And we were doing this one scene in particular with Rafe, and it was actually on my birthday in real life. And Rafe gave me a piece of advice as we were doing the scene that, quite honestly, just like the way I describe it to people is, like a chiropractor cracks your back. It was like he just cracked my back, and then all of a sudden I felt it in my body. And then going to set, I felt like, okay, I am the prince and this is my set and, these are my people. And it took over in that way. And Rafe is such a respectful actor. He's so, in control of himself and in tune with himself. He would never, ever go up. And I knew he never would. And I knew he could see me in that moment yearning for that. And he just knew what I needed before I did and gave it. And I remember profusely thanking him after and recognizing that to him, this was probably just any other moment. But of course, to me, it made a huge, huge, huge difference. And that's a feeling I've taken and I'm taking with me wherever I go now. So.
I love that memory. I'll respect the fact if you want to keep this private, but what was that particular piece of advice he gave you in that moment?
I mean, yeah, I think the specifics of the words I'll keep to myself, but I do think, the message to me, something not in the words, but actually in how he was communicating it to me. He kept gesturing to his stomach, to his gut, and he said, this is what we're looking for, right? And your connection to this is what we're looking for here. So I think that really, to me, something in the cerebral aspect of it, but really in the physical and the connecting of the two, it really it did something for me. And yeah, it was like a lightning strike, in the best way.
It's a beautiful memory. I appreciate you sharing that. Uberto, I wanted to come your way in terms of working with this exceptional ensemble here, because I feel like more often than not, I hear people use the phrase, like, what did the director bring out of the actor? And I do think that is applicable, but I like asking about it in the reverse. Can you tell me something about your ensemble here that brought something new out of you as a director?
Very easy to answer that one. I approached, in spite of how much the material and the writing of the script was an emotional experience for me, by the time I got to the set, I was mainly working on an intellectual level. And Charlie and Rafe and Juliette reminded me that what was most important was the emotional truth of the circumstances, of the events, of the scenes we were playing. And they gave me emotional readings, emotional moments beyond the ones that I was initially looking for. And I was actually laughing with Juliette the other day and saying how often in the editing room I ended up choosing a take which was her interpretation, her emotional interpretation of a moment, rather than my initial intellectual interpretation of a moment. And I think that given the talent that I was working with, the gift they gave me is their own truth and their own, what Charlie was just saying now, the fact that their stomachs were into their performances and became people rather than characters, rather than the intellectual idea of a character. They became real people in front of the camera, and that is why I think the film does connect with an audience, because it's not about the recreation of a myth of people who are distant from us and they are just figures in a literary world that has no connection to us, but they managed to make them real people for an audience today, so that their battles, their emotional struggles are completely connected to an audience today. I think that's what they have done. And I would not have been able to do it without them.
Such a vital quality here. Both of you can chime in on this if you could think of an example, but something you just said kind of sparked this question in my mind. I love hearing about how things can evolve on the spot. And again, it's an ambitious production. I'm sure you have to plan to make sure everything actually happens. But I find that you can discover some of the best movie magic when things veer off schedule or off plan. So can you give me an example of a time on set when you had to pivot from what you originally wanted, but found something better in the process?
I mean, I'll just say, I think, because it's not really for me to say what moment's working. I can say what meant a lot to me in the experience of doing it. I think, a moment that I had with Juliette towards the end, I realized shooting with her, she wouldn't wait for action or cut or anything. She would just kind of look at me and take me in as people are setting up for the shot. And it was as though we were, communicating with one another, just purely looking at each other, looking into each other, having this conversation, and, everything kind of coming together up until action. And it's like we had just been there that whole time. And there is something about that to me and her bringing me into that I am so deeply grateful for. And it is that unknown and trying to explore in oneself. Of course, if you have someone like that with a person like that is such a gift and is the unexpected with the experience that you hope for, I think. But it's hard to pick out one moment as much as it really was just the all-encompassing kind of essence of the experience.
Oh, great example there.
I think there is a pivotal scene in the film, I don't know if you agree with me, which is the first encounter between Odysseus and Penelope, between the husband and the wife. And they've been away from each other for 20 years. She's been longing for his return. She's been suffering his absence. And he's been fearful of returning because of his guilt, because of his profound hatred towards himself for what he has become. A man of violence, a man of war, a man of pain. And as we were filming that scene, the actors found moments which were not written in the script, which were not verbal moments, but were a way for the two characters to look at each other anew and to find the language of two people who recognize and at the same time do not want to be recognized by each other. And that was was certainly edited into the scene. And I think it makes that scene one of the best scenes in the film, at least to me.
I can second that. Watching, from my perspective at least, watching two acting legends navigate that particular part of the material, just like it overjoyed me as a fan of theirs. So I have to let you go soon. Charlie, I did want to make sure to ask you this question because I brought it up briefly before we even started rolling. I think it's the coolest thing ever that you're sitting on this couch for The Return. And the last time you were here, you were sitting here for National Anthem. And there's such drastically different films. And I think that's true of your entire filmography. So I was wondering, is there any particular, like, a consistent thing you look for in new projects that you take on, whether it's the material itself or the people you work with that, keeps you going the right way, but also lets you have variety in your work?
Well, thank you so much. That's a huge compliment, first of all. I think it's a little bit of both. I think, of course, the people are what your life is for that time, and it's the experience, and that's how I remember it, and that's how it lives for me. So, of course, that is so much of it. But with the material and with the character, I think for me personally, the character and feeling something, really believing in myself, something that I think the last couple of things I've really felt, National Anthem and this very much being that, was when Uberto asked me to do this, I genuinely believed in my stomach that I couldn't do it. And I do think there's something about growing with that feeling and going from a place of, you know, like riding the bike with training wheels and taking them off and going, I can't ride a bike. And then all of a sudden it's happening and you're doing it. So I think that's the feeling I try to find every time again, if I'm lucky enough to get that.
Keep using
I certainly
that
share
compass.
that idea. I can't do this. You know, you go into a project like this when you go into tackling Homer or trying to share Homer with an audience today, and you say, this is impossible, this is beyond me. And in fact, I think it's the fear that feeds you into the work and helps you the work. If you didn't have that fear, if you thought you just could do it, you wouldn't be able to dig deep and find something worthwhile saying, I think.
There's no fear. What's the point? If there's no ambition in your work, it's not going to strike a chord in a fresh way for viewers. So the fact that you both pull this off here with your entire team is mighty impressive. I'm going to say huge congratulations on The Return, and thank you so much for sharing some of your experience with us.
Thank you so much
for
you.